was in some really dire straits, a younger church like ours that's had some issues with their senior leadership, and so they were in a really tough place, and they came to us and asked for help, and we thought, well, maybe we could partner with them, and that fell through, and then we thought, well, maybe we'll get some office space and we'll go back to the setup, tear down life, which is still a possibility. And so we thought of a couple fun options. Hamilton and a houseboat was my cry for a long time. I found, we were looking for office space, and I found a houseboat for sale. It was really nice. It would have been a lot of fun. But that didn't work out. They took it off the market. Then we thought, well, there's this dry cleaner on 45th, Hamilton Middle School, and a dry cleaner. And we even looked into Hamilton and a puppet theater that was for sale in Wallingford over there by the Pagliacci Pizza. We're not joking about this. We looked into all of these things. And, okay, none of them seemed to work out. We looked into renting a warehouse down on Stone Way, but the price of that lease was even more than a mortgage would have been on this place, and so we felt like that wasn't good stewardship. It would have been a very tough financial, yeah. And then we even looked into renting another church that's just about 5 blocks from here, and talked with some of their leadership, and then that sort of fizzled out. So we show you this just to say, we just keep hitting our head against this wall because we love Wallingford. We feel like God put us here for this season, but we've always, come up short. So after all of that, 2 years of looking into all these options, 3 strikes with trying to negotiate a way to buy this property, then along came Dawn. That's how we should have said it. And then we met Dawn. And if you heard me share at the gala, I went to a pastor's meeting in December, and this was just a few weeks before the developers were going to close on this property, and they had started to stop returning messages, and we were feeling pretty discouraged. And we walked into a prayer meeting, and I met a pastor named Dawn, who has been ministering in Seattle for 42 years. In Ballard, and he had never come to this meeting before. I almost didn't come to the meeting, and I walked in and I saw another pastor named Don, who I did know, and I went up to Don. I said, "Hey, Don, how's it going?" Don's also a retired pastor, and he's like, "Hey, have you met this Don?" And I said, "No." And so Don introduced me to Don, and we got talking, and it just seemed like all things clicked as far as what their need was. Don has been desiring and wanting to retire for the last several years, and his plan was this would be his last year no matter what. But he desperately did not want to sell the building to a developer and have it turned into condos. And so he met me. I hope he has a slide presentation like this. And then we met Dave. Wouldn't that be great? But, probably not. So, okay. So we met Don and started talking to him about this potential opportunity of what would this look like. So this is the opportunity that we're discerning. And our prayer is this, and we'd love to just invite you into this prayer with us, is God, is Ballard our new worship hub? Is Ballard our new worship hub? That's sort of, since I met Dawn, a question that I've been praying about, that the senior leadership team's been praying about. For some of you who we've talked to this about, God, is Ballard our new worship hub? Wallingford has been our worship hub for the first 9 years of the church. Really the first 10, because there was a year in our living room before we even launched the church. But is this a new decade and a new hub, right? And so in Alpha, Nikki Gumbel talks about the 5 CS's. So if you've done Alpha, you'll recognize this. When you're trying to discern God's direction, you're first looking to Scripture, and you're asking Scripture to speak to you, commanding Scripture. You're praying and asking the Holy Spirit to compel you, to help you to see. You're seeking the counsel of the saints, and I can't tell you how many people we've talked to and how many hours, hundreds of hours of conversation we've had with other people who are older than us, wiser than us, have done this before. Other pastors in the city, getting their thoughts and opinions on it. And then common sense. Common sense is a part of God's world. And so God will not just tell you to do something without also telling you the reasons why. So this is one of my favorite things in Alpha when he says, like, God will also give you the reasons. There might not have been reasons you thought about before God started speaking to you, but he won't just tell you to do something but give you no reasons. So common sense is important, and we'll talk about some of those things. And then circumstantial signs. So just like, whoa, that's weird. Like meeting Dawn. That's a circumstantial sign. And then a really funny thing happened very nearly after I met Dawn, and I think Ryan and I had already met with Dawn and Christy Duncan, Dawn's wife. Allie and I were out at dinner at a restaurant up on Finney Ridge, so not even in Ballard. We're up on Finney Ridge at Windy City Pie. Anybody been to Windy City? Yeah. Ben knows all the spots. So Windy City, and we're sitting there, and they don't have room for us, so they sit us right up by the front. And there happens to be they got mints and then just some brochures and things, like neighborhood things and postcards and stuff. And sure enough, there's this little handout, Nordic News, which is for the Nordic Museum in Ballard, if you know where that is. And on the front of the Nordic News Museum, they were highlighting an art exhibit that's happening in Ballard through March 10th. So it must have just gone down, but this happened back at the very beginning of January, end of December or something that I saw this. And I saw this, and of course, my thought went to this. Do you guys not see this? These are European starlings. These are European starlings. And I said, God, is that you? That's what I was saying in my head. Like, it was a really, at the moment, it was so confusing what was going on. And I picked that up and I said, that's so interesting that Ballard is hosting an art museum about European starlings. And we've been hosting an art museum for the last 2 years, made by Emily and Ty right here in our own sanctuary. So that was one of the funny things that's happened that made me say, okay, I think I need to pay attention to this Dawn character.
It's probably really important to just note, too, that it wasn't like Dave encountered the circumstantial signs and all the eggs went into the Ballard Baptist bucket or basket. We actually pursued for several months, like, a torturing question. If the Ballard gives us a deal that we can actually shoulder at this place, would we take this over Ballard Baptist? So this wasn't like a complete shit. This pamphlet did not represent a complete shit.
No, this is not. This is not the end of the presentation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But a funny thing, a fun thing to wonder: is that you, God? You could always ask that question: is that you, God? Did you orchestrate this? So anyhow, this is the least important, but the funniest thing that happened. Okay. Right. So Ryan, do you want to talk about this one? Why do we say hub versus home?
Yeah.
So why is Ballard a new hub?
Yeah. So we really love this notion of a hub versus a home because, in a certain sense, it's actually how we've always thought about our church, and these bullet points really outline why. Because we really embrace and understand church, especially when you start a church and you're renting at a location, as a people gathered and scattered in the city. There's this, if anybody has been through one of the newcomer classes and recalls our centering church diagram, people come together every week and then scatter into the city. There's this gathered and scattered notion of what a church is, meaning that a church isn't just location-based. And so we say hub versus home because Sideris is, our missional centrality is still very much in our cohorts, is still very much in our cadres. No matter where our Sunday morning worship gathering will be, or you could call that our hub, we're still going to have 3 cohorts here in Wallingford in the fall, likely, right? So this is just who we are as a church. We're very much out in the city. Our community life happens out in the city, not at a place. Even though we've had free reign of this place for a couple of years now. Our motto, Jesus made house calls, still remains. Dave likes to joke. He's like, I'd probably make people come into a church building a lot more if I knew we were, paying by the day for it, in the form of a mortgage, right? Like, I got to make this building worth it. But we've always said that Jesus made house calls, and we love meeting in the city with you all and even people who aren't yet Christians or yet connected to Sideris. And we fully expect to do things like Alpha and other things outside of a church building location, like at the Swedish Club. I don't know if we'll ever do the gala in a different place. It was so magical.
It was magical.
It was so magical in February. But then this also goes into the notion of we've over the course of these past few months, we've really discovered that Ballard Baptist has a rich legacy of planting churches out of this location themselves. We keep on bumping into pastors who will say, "My church planted out of Ballard Baptist," or "That church planted out of Ballard Baptist." We're part of something called the East Sound Converge Network, church planting network, and which has their roots in the Baptists. And a lot of these churches actually have commonality and overlap with the Ballard Baptist Church in really cool ways, some of which we're not even quite clear on yet, but it seems like there's a lot of sending that has happened from the Ballard Baptist Church in the past. So we even kind of entertain ideas of, is this a hub for continued church planting in the future? So that's really why we're conceiving of hub versus home. This isn't so much a church home, so much as a church Sunday morning gathering place that we can continue to scatter out into the city and bring the gospel of Jesus everywhere.
Yeah, I guess so. To make it clear, in case you hadn't read the other things that we've sent, whereas this place would cost us $5 million, Ballard Baptist would be gifted to Sideris for $0. And when you pay $0 for something, it's cheaper than when you pay $5 million. I used to be a CPA. If you don't understand it, $200 an hour. Okay. So, but just the thing that I love about this is that, one of the things that we sort of mourned is like, would we be able to afford to do Alpha at the Swedish Club? Yeah. Which is we love it because it's a neutral space for people that might be terrified to walk into a church, and we want the consideration of Jesus to tear down as many barriers. But there's a real chance we probably wouldn't have been able to afford that. So we could have done it here, and that would have been good too. But like the freedom that it allows us to not sort of be a slave to our mortgage it's a kind of a beautiful thing. Yeah. And I think Ballard Baptist has planted like 40 churches.
Oh my goodness.
Since it started in 1893, right? So even though it hasn't been a great couple decades for them as a church, they just have a rich history of like so much life coming out of them. And so as we talk to these people that know about the history of Ballard Baptist, there's an excitement of what if that becomes a sending church once again, right? And that's definitely the DNA and the hope of Sideris, is that we're able to become a sending church. And again, it's easier to send when you, again, aren't tied to a mortgage that's almost impossible to pay each and every month. So it really helps us maintain the church not just as a home just for us, but as a hub for doing all sorts of ministry throughout the city. And hopefully even planting churches, maybe even one day planting a church again in Wallingford. So we're already talking about that kind of stuff. It's not like in the near future, but something we're considering. So, all right, so hub, not just a home. Okay, so the next thing here is how to save a life of a building.
Where did I go wrong?
Yeah.
Somewhere alone in the bitterness. We wanted to put that audio in the slide, but we couldn't hear it.
Sorry. Tired, Ryan. So
of a building.
Yeah, so one of the huge things, like why we fought so hard here, is we really, to see a house of worship, a place where the gospel is, where the community can gather, where, once that's gone, it's gone. It's never coming back in a city like Seattle. The land's just too valuable, right? So we always thought like, oh, maybe God's got us here to save a life, the life of a building that some people poured their heart and soul and money into decades and decades ago. Maybe we're even an answer to their prayers long ago. And so we always thought that was one of the reasons why we came to fight so hard for this place. And then as we've been going, and it just keeps, the door doesn't seem to be opened by God. And then we meet Dawn, and we see this other space that's almost the exact same story, except that they've been there even longer. is we start to ask, perhaps God did want us to save the life of a building, but it was just, we had the wrong building in mind, you know? And it's the Swedish Baptist building in Ballard, not this Nazarene building in Wallingford. And so the question we've been asking is, did we have the right inclination, just the wrong building? And that's often how it works. If you've ever dated and then gotten married, you realize this is exactly how it works. The right inclination, God's putting in my heart to be married, just the wrong person. And so that's often how it works. So it doesn't mean God's not calling you to be married. He's just, keep your eyes open. Who knows if Dawn will walk into your life? Okay, so here is a picture of the original Ballard. You see the car in the bottom. So on the left side, in the bottom, that is Ballard Baptist building built in 1910. And I just found this today when I was looking up pictures for the Ballard building. Another picture that popped up was from this article in Ballard, and I just talked about it in my sermon on Sunday. Andrew Carnegie gave $15,000 to build the Ballard Library in 1904. Do you know what that building is? Does anybody recognize? Do you know what's in that building now? The kangaroo and the kiwi. This is no longer a library. Ladies and gentlemen, this is still a church. And the question is God wanting us to use us to help keep it a church? And I just thought it was so funny that I just talked about Andrew Carnegie and then found this article today. One of the 2,500 libraries he funded around the world. So that gives you a sense of these buildings were built at the same time. Now, here's what's cool. You might say, that's not the picture I've seen, because the colored picture is now the current building. In 1939, there was an earthquake. That happens in Seattle sometimes, and the top fell off. So, so that is no longer there. If you're looking for that, you will not find it. The current building is there, and for some of you who are at the women's retreat, you might recognize the Shaken and Unbreakable, the Ballard Baptist, the Swedish Baptists in Ballard, Shaken and Unbreakable. So that was one of the mottos of the women's retreat. So we thought that was kind of cool, just to see things do change, but some things stay the same. So, okay, next slide. All right, so where we're at in the process, in December, after I met Don at this pastor's meeting, me and Ryan spent 4 hours with Don and his wife Christy just talking and dreaming and honestly, like they were just weeping tears of joy in front of us that they've been praying for this, and that was the first time we'd ever met them. It was a really amazing experience. It's so different than the tens of hundreds of hours we spent talking to other people. But it was just like they just couldn't believe that God was going to let this church remain a church, potentially, if it all worked out. And back then we didn't know. We were just investigating, is it a possibility? Then in January, the SLT went down and met with Dawn and toured the building. And then in late January, we met with the Ballard Baptist Church elders, their other elders. And then in late January, we actually had an architect, a friend of ours, just walk through the building and give us some, and we'll talk about some of the things that would need to happen to the building. We'd be able to use the down payment that we've been saving up for a mortgage on this place. We'd be able to use that to do some of these deferred maintenance things, do some renovations to make the building suitable for us. So that was really encouraging. He sort of gave us, oh yeah, you could do this, you could do that, and this would probably work, and this is what it would cost, and general stuff. And then in February, Ryan and I got to meet the whole congregation at Ballard Baptist Church. That is about 20 or so individuals, most of whom are older, like quite a bit older than us. And they're all wonderful. And it was just a really great they asked us questions, and it was kind of funny. They put us up like it was like a tribunal. They put us up on a table, and it was like it was like a Senate hearing, and they grilled us with questions. It was great.
Yeah, and it's
No, they're really nice questions. Yeah,
they're really nice questions. Wilma had a deck of cards that she had her questions on. Mm-hmm. It was great. And it's probably important to let you guys know, if you weren't at the gala, that Dawn and Christy are really evaluating this and hoping that this would be that they're going to gift us Sideris, the church building, but also that their church members would join our congregation as well. And Dawn and Christy, even though Dawn's retiring at the end of the year, they're staying local, and they've expressed interest of wanting to stay on with the rest of the congregation as well. So this would be a merger of sorts with her as that.
Yeah, so it would be a spiritual merger of them into our congregation. Everything moving forward would be Sideris owned, and sort of Sideris mission statement and Sideris, but they would merge into and hope. And I think that's everyone's desire, is they'd be a part of our congregation, and we would welcome them in, and they would be just instant wisdom for us, and we'd learn to do church together and find ways to make it feel like home for them, things they're comfortable with, ways they do things, and yet they're totally open to us. They recognize that we kind of are the future of gospel preaching church in Seattle. They're not trying to like hold on. They're open. They're not like saying, well, don't change anything. Right. It's like, change whatever you need to change, and just we want to see this church continue to be used for God. So we got to meet their congregation, and that went really well. And then they asked me to come preach because they wanted to make sure, I guess, I could preach. You see the thumbs up on each of these? That one was shaky, but I think I got a thumbs up. And then a group of them, a small group of them, some of you got to meet them, came and actually worshiped with us 2 weeks ago, and got to see. See how happy our congregation is. This is vision casting, yeah. But they really enjoyed their visit, as far as we can tell, as well, when they came and visited us. So that's where we're at in the process. And so we've had lots of interaction with them, and Don has invited us to meet with his lawyer a couple times, and so there's just a lot. It's just like there's no contention. It's amazing. It's like what you would imagine an older brother, would be like in the faith. It's like the most amazing thing. It's almost like it's been so hard for 2 years. It's almost like we didn't think something like this is even possible. And it's part of the reason why we feel like, well, this feels like Christ. This feels like God. This is just so different. Like Don inviting us to meet with his lawyer as if we're already a part of the same organization. It was like, well, yeah, we were part of the same organization, the kingdom of God. And we've just felt the opposite of that the whole other 2 years negotiating. And so it's been a really cool deal. So that's where we're at with them. And I can't remember what's next. Okay, and we'll talk about what the next steps would be. But basically, they're now in their basically discerning process where they have to go through their constitutional and bylaws, where they have to make a decision: do they truly want to merge with us and gift the building to Sideris legally? They have to go through all the hoops yeah, to do that. So they're kind of walking through that process, and everything seems like a thumbs up. And so we really have to be ready to receive a gift, right? So how do you prepare to receive a gift? You have to know this is what God wants you to take on, because we would not want to take it on if we didn't feel like this is where God wanted us to be for the next season of our church, okay? So here are some practical considerations. This would be the common sense of, as we've talked as a senior leadership team, some of the things that we've thought, well, maybe this could be why God's doing it this way. Some common sense things. So why don't you read this, right?
Yeah. So this actually comes from our original prospectus that comes from the very beginning of the church. A little sentence in here, a few sentences that we pulled out. Where we're talking about ourselves. A part of our calling as Sideris is to engage an often underserved demographic, young adults living between college and parenthood. Many young professionals live in the city, and the church needs to be in the city to serve this population. An encounter with the gospel during this formative life phase will help raise up the next generation of leaders who will hopefully live on mission both now and wherever God takes them next. I think that's something that we've really stuck to throughout the course of these last two and a half years. That we have asked the question, where's God taking us next? Anything that wasn't in a neighborhood that we feel like young adults primarily plant themselves in when they move to Seattle to start their lives in their 20s and going into the 30s, we didn't really consider those neighborhoods. So actually, as you look at kind of Seattle church history, you have a lot of churches that get a little bit older in these neighborhoods and then end up buying property up north in Shoreline or moving over to the east side or things like this. And that was something that we never really felt settled in our spirit to do, primarily because we feel God calling us to those who are in between college and having kids who are in and around these downtown. So that's kind of like the neighborhoods that are just like the first semicircle out from downtown, from the city of Seattle proper. And so when it comes to like asking the common sense piece of, is God, are you calling us to do this? The first thing we ask really is, God, is this really aligned with what we feel like you've tasked us with here in Seattle? Is this a further representation of us picking up and continuing on the responsibility we feel like you've handed to us? And Ballard really does represent another large Seattle neighborhood full of folks just like that in their 20s and 30s, in between college and having kids themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, and we take that really serious. You know, like we toured with our realtor a building that was up in Greenwood, and it's just, that's not that far. And I know some of you live in Greenwood, but we're like, we think that's too far north. Like, which is, some people are like, you're crazy, that's not very far north. But this part of our mission of wanting to be available to young professionals is so important to who we are and who we always have been from the beginning, that it really did drive a lot of how we looked into different opportunities. So
yeah, we were offered a free building up on Holler Lake a while ago.
Yeah.
Right? So we said no to that. And so we just wanted to pull together a little bit of a demographic slide here for you. This isn't super important, but every bubble represents the scale, number of adults in their 20s and 30s in each neighborhood to scale. So you see these kind of bubbles. So you know, your Wallingford bubble and your Ballard bubble, and this isn't to show that like Ballard's better than Wallingford in any way, shape, or form. Like, in fact, like maybe that East Lake bubble is more accessible when you're in the Wallingford bubble, right? Yeah. Like it might be more difficult for people who are in East Lake looking for a new church to conceive of going to church all the way over in Ballard, for instance. You know, so all these bubbles overlap in a certain sense, but this does show that Ballard has a pretty high population of adults in their 20s and 30s. That represents a pretty significant mission field there. In fact, we have you know, we're close to churches in Ballard, and what they've said is they're like, we're really excited that another church would be joining us in the task to reach fellow Ballardites here in the city, you know, or here in Ballard. So it feels like a large mission field there, over there in Ballard as well. So those are the different pockets of those different neighborhoods that we talked about, and how many adults in their 20s and 30s are kind of in each one of them. Moving forward, so this is those circles aren't really to scale. So that map in the middle, the circles aren't to scale. Those are just the different neighborhoods, though. It really shows probably the biggest pro of Wallingford was is how neighborhood central this neighborhood is. That virtually like all these neighborhoods, and a lot of you live in all these neighborhoods, really can go to Wallingford pretty easily. It's about a 10-minute drive from all these neighborhoods. Very simple and easy to get there. And so that's one of the huge pros of Wallingford. And then one of our pastor friends, Jeff from CCC, will give him credit for this phrase.
Yeah.
He said, you know, Wallingford is also neighborhood neutral. Like, no one really has an opinion about Wallingford, good or bad.
Yeah.
and that's not necessarily the case with Ballard. When we asked all of you to write down something that came to your mind when you heard when you thought about Ballard, you had something to write down. I don't think anybody has anything to write down about Wallingford. Maybe Dick's. Yeah. Maybe.
How many of you didn't know for a while even where Wallingford was? If there was a time when you lived in Seattle, if somebody said, "Oh, I go to church in Wallingford," you've been like, "Where exactly is Wallingford?" Does anybody have that? Yeah. That's a common experience. And then I always tell, "Oh, it's between Fremont and U District," or something like that, or And one of the huge things we love about this space is you can always say, "It's right behind the Dick's Hamburgers," and everyone's like, "Oh, I know where that is." And so Ballard's not like that. There are people who have sort of a negative view of Ballard, whether that's for just some of the issues that Ballard has had recently, or that it's further away from the freeway, or they just don't like Scandinavians, and there's a lot of Scandinavians in Ballard. That's sort of the history of Ballard, if you didn't know. So this is one of the huge pros of trying to find a way to stay in Wallingford, is that it's central.
That's why we fought so hard.
And that's still a huge pro, and something that we'll probably never get over, no matter what happens. But something to consider, and even as we continue to process this, how much of a factor should that be? The neighborhood centrality of it, and its ease of access for so many people. It's a huge thing. Yeah. It's a huge pro. And so, so location right here is so great. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. And so we started thinking one of the huge pros of Ballard, it's not central in the same way that Wallingford is, but it's what you might call a destination neighborhood. And so actually Andrew sent us this article. I guess Seattle Times is doing a whole week-long article a day or something on Ballard this week. And he just sent me this week, so he popped it in here. But basically this is what Seattle Times was saying. The Ballard Farmers Market is by far the most popular farmers market in Seattle, drawing about 603,000 visitors every year, or 10,000 to 20,000 weekly shoppers. I couldn't believe that figure.
It's huge.
I live pretty close to Ballard, and I've only been to a couple times. I'm usually fairly busy on Sundays, so that might explain it. But 10 to 20,000 people drive to Ballard, find a place to park, to go to the Ballard Farmers Market every week, and the Ballard Baptist Church building is like 8 blocks from the market. So you could walk there after church. You'd already have a parking spot because you'd got to church early, as I know you all do. And
I'm curious, how many people have left church on Sunday to go to the Ballard Farmers Market here? Yeah. I know a lot of you. I'm always talking to a lot of you as you walk out. You're like, I'm going to Ballard Farmers Market. I think a lot of people do that. I've done that. It's a destination.
And so it's an interesting thing, Ballard, because it is a destination. They've got obviously great restaurants and ice cream shops. If you're from Portland, Salt and Straw. I'm looking at Ben. Ben Thompson was always going to Ballard all the time when he lived out here. Okay, so it's something to think about. And, I think part of the reason we feel comfortable even considering this option is that it's basically on the same bus line, the 44. It's just a ways down the bus line. On a Sunday, Google Maps says it's about a 7-minute drive from here to the Ballard Baptist building. And so, that's probably about, for at least half of the church, it'll probably be about a 7-minute more drive. Or I think you had looked it up on the bus route, 11 minutes more on the bus, if you stay on the bus and keep going, if you say you're coming from the U District. So, and one of the things, well, maybe I'll let Ty share that thing about, yeah, I'll let you share that thing about that we were talking about. Okay, so, oh, the teaser. Okay, so now I got to get through this. Next steps, okay? So, next steps, everyone continues to pray. Ballard Baptist will have to take an official vote if they want to gift Sideris the building. Sideris will have to decide if we want to accept the gift. At some point, if all of those things were to happen, then we want to start hosting some mingles between the two congregations, get to know them a little bit more, even before the merger would happen. One of the things we need to establish a transition team. We'll talk about that in a second. We would need to employ an architect firm. We've already got a lead on that, like I said. We'd begin an initial clean out of the Ballard building. We need to, first spruce up the kids' room. This is one of the huge advantages over like doing setup and tear down in the middle school again, is the kids. We have so many kids, you know, and so many young babies, and wanting a space for them to thrive and grow into, and yeah, for parents too, you know. We obviously want to continue to be able to reach young professionals, but those young professionals will marry and have kids, and we want them to continue to have life and a space for them to do that. That's why this is such part of why this is exciting, because we weren't sure if we're going to be able to have that. And you know, you make whatever work. So if this, you know, okay, yeah, there is a chance, a world in which we all really want this to happen, and then it doesn't happen. Okay, so just know that, and we'll be okay. It's always hard when you get excited. It's like, this is one of the exciting things. And then if it doesn't happen, oh, does that mean we're donezo? No, just means we pray and we wait. So spruce up the kids' room, and at some point we'll start worshiping together with them in Ballard. Again, those will be Sideris-led worship services, so it'll look and feel and smell just like Sideris. And then renovations will start and continue. Once, you know, we're not going to be able to do all the renovations before we move in, and so there'll be kind of a fun time of, you know, watching it blossom. So you get to watch it. That's so cool. Okay, so if this were to happen. Okay, so this is an awesome timeline that Ryan put together. Ryan is a great graphic designer. You did all the graphic design on this. So why don't you walk them through? Basically, this is just a potential of what this could look like.
Yeah, this is potential, and this is best case scenario, so this is probably the fastest things could move. And so here today, we're at our family member meeting today, March 26th. Next month, we will engage the architect firm to probably equip them with everything they need to get a set of good plans on the building. Next month, we're really hoping to create a transition team that is identifying the people who will be able to lead, like leaders of teams that'll kind of foster our transition over into this building. And we have another slide on that, on what components will kind of that'll be comprised of, I suppose. We really want to start praying for Ballard Baptist and Ballard, and so we want to do some prayer walks over there. In May, Ballard Baptist will vote on gifting us the building. We'll obviously have the opportunity to accept if they do. And then if we do accept, we'd like to move forward with some of those events that we talked about. In May, perhaps late May, start cleaning out the building. There's just a lot of stuff in there from a building that's been there for a long, long time that needs a lot of clean out. A couple rollaway dumpsters worth, perhaps. I'm not exactly sure. In order to get it ready for us coming in there and sprucing up kids' spaces and even worship auditorium, start maybe some minor renovations that don't require pulling permits, things like paint, carpets, stuff like that. And then in June, move our offices over, and we thought it might be nice to give ourselves, between worshiping here and worshiping there, a baptism Sunday at Green Lake to host that towards the end of June. And then we'd move into Ballard starting in July. We're still, it does feel really fast and like a lot even to us, and so we're planning on asking the developer here if he might consider giving us a month or two extra, so we do have some buffer, but we can't really bank on that at this point. He could be knocking it down July 1st. for all we know at this point. Then we have these hymns.
That's where you guys come in.
That's where you guys come in. I mean, this really is, honestly, like, our family members can brainstorm over what's the best way to go there and what are some things we need to do in order to get our ducks in a row and make this not only happen, but happen in the best way it could happen. And so this is to invite creativity. And then we have renovations starting perhaps in August, perhaps even those more extensive ones starting later in the fall. We'd love to beta test a night service to see if we might be able to night services. Maybe not each and every Sunday, but perhaps those might feel great in the summer over in Ballard. It's a different kind of environment over there. If you guys have been there in the evenings, it's really fun and happening. So maybe a night service might work well in Ballard. And we've talked with other churches who only do morning services over there, and they were like, man, that's an incredible idea. I think you might have a lot of draw for something like that, especially in the summers. So we might test a night service in Ballard over there this fall, towards the end of the summer, in August. So, yeah, that's our timeline as we have.
Yeah, and then you can see the Hello Ballard kickoff.
Yeah. Talk about that.
I mean, I think there's going to be, through the summer, some transition, and then at some point we'll sort of engage the larger Ballard neighborhood with some type of a, hey, we're here, we love you. So be thinking about what things could be fun to do that. Could be community service projects, it could be lots of things, but like, anyhow, that's a potential timeline of how these things might play out. Our lease here right now ends at the end of June, so July 1st we need to be somewhere else. Again, we might be able to extend that, but we have not asked yet. We have not asked because we're still technically negotiating the price of the building. So we haven't told them that we have another option, but they know, of course, we're probably looking at other options because we're so smart. Okay. Okay, so the renovations that we need to do, evolve the general vibe, update bathrooms. We need to create a foyer space so they don't, like we have this foyer out here, they don't have that currently, but there is the vision for how that could happen that we talked with the architect about. That's exciting. So creating a mingle space in a foyer-like thing, extending, they have a balcony like here, extending it in a wraparound fashion. Super vibey, super cool. You remember that tower that tends to fall off at times? There is some shoring up of the tower we need to do. But
it might not make
you never have to walk underneath the tower to get in the building, so you're fine. But we'll shore up that tower, no problem, at some point. But it's been up. Nothing's fallen off since 1939, so, you know, but we do live near a large fault in the earth. So, okay. And then there's a big banquet hall in the basement that just needs some renovating to make it operational again. So those are some projects that are kind of fun to think and dream about. And so let's go to the next slide. And so we've been thinking about, we haven't even started this. We've just we wanted to just talk about, at some point we need to create sort of a transition team. So people, we call them moving angels. That they have a heart for moving things and they don't grumble about it. They're just like, I love moving things. These are called angels. They just move things, no problem.
Also, it's called men's ministry, too.
It also is called men's ministry, yeah. So moving angels. Yeah, so that's what we kicked it off at the bowling alley. Next thing, moving angels. Yeah, if your hips are good from bowling, so mine are not, so I'm out. Okay, so if you, interior designers, people have a skill in that or even trained in that might want to be a part of kind of interior designing plans and doing that kind of stuff. Project managers, so people with engineering gifts or project management, maybe even working construction, people like that. Kids space cultivators, people that, you know, like we spruced up the kids space here. It didn't always actually look as nice as it does now. So, you know, that's something that a lot of people could do. You don't have to be an expert in any way on that. Event organizers, so helping with the mingle, the social events, and how we get both churches excited about doing this and doing fun things as we transition. And then And then maybe even sound and lighting engineers as we update some of the sound and lighting in the building, because there's some updates that need to happen there. And then the final one, SLT resuscitators. It's been a very long 2 years for the SLT. So people who want to encourage, bake cookies for, and send on vacations, the SLTs, the elders and deacons. We may need just some general love. Yeah, that's one supposed to be funny, but it's not a real part of the team. But I'm just so thankful for our elders and deacons and how they pressed into these decisions. As you saw the list of potential things we've considered over the last 2 years, it's been a wild, Mr. Toad's wild ride, and they've been called into a lot of long, late meetings, meeting with other churches, it's just been a lot. So definitely be praying for the SLT and encourage them and thank them for everything that they've done. So next slide, be thinking about that. That's one of the questions on here, is what ways stood out that you might help with a transition should it occur. So be thinking about this list.
We could pay people to do all this stuff, but we could really also just make this space our own and really own it in some ways. Not only does it save money, but we could be able to just continue to capture who we are and bring that into our next hub as well. So.
Yeah, and we're definitely going to pay some people.
Right.
But to have our people involved in the process and organizing it and helping to manage it would be just such a blessing to us as pastors, so it's not all on us, but also how do we put our heart and soul into this? Yeah. Okay, next slide. Okay, so speaking of those resuscitators, I wanted to invite the SLT just to share a quick, brief thought, each of them, as they've been sitting in all these meetings, they've been thinking about this, they've seen the building, what kind of stands out for them that they'd want to share, just real briefly, guys and gals. So, Joseph, why don't you go first? Just come on up, take my seat here, and we'll just go one at a time. This is Joseph, he's an elder. And what's your thought?
Yeah, well, I think my thought is, I was thinking about it, I think the thing that stands out to me the most is how it felt to first meet Don and Christy. Don, the pastor, and his wife, Christy, and they're very, it was joyful and peaceful to get to talk to them, to hear about their idea for the merger. Dave and Ryan said, we talked to a different church about merging just a few months before, I think, for God to just get us to read the book about it ahead of time. Yeah. And the difference in how it felt to be in those discussions versus how it felt to be in these discussions, it was okay, this is exactly what we were looking for with the other church, and we didn't see it, so we said we really shouldn't merge. This is not wise. But we saw everything that we were looking for in the previous discussion. We saw with Don and Christy, and it just seemed like a really, really good sign that this could be something great.
Yeah. Thanks, Joseph. Yeah. I'll just say this because Joseph won't toot his own horn. He literally read a book about church mergers in less than a week because we were having these meetings, and it was that's the kind. You'd never know that, but the SLT has put this kind of work in through this process. And okay, so let's get Kate up. Kate, Deacon Kate.
Well, I feel like I could say, I feel like I could say a lot of things, and I echo exactly what Joseph just said. But I think the biggest thing that I've been thinking of is that it's hard when you're in the moment to tell if God's closing or opening doors. And so throughout a lot of these processes that we've been, because I've been in the SLT 2 years this month, which is when a lot of this kind of started. And it's hard to tell when you're in the moment when God is closing a door or when God is opening a door. Mm-hmm. And so we've pursued a lot of different things. And I thought a lot of those doors were opening. As an optimistic glass half full person, I was excited about a lot of them. And then God very clearly closed those doors in his timing. And so when we first heard about this, it felt too good to be true. In some ways, we were I don't know, it's like too easy. And, I mean, it's like God can make things easy, like that's okay. But it just felt like it was almost too easy. And we actually like had a breakfast meeting one day, and we made a list of pros and cons all initially and sent them in before we came. And it's like the first time I feel like I've had a more con list than a pros list. And I just had some gut like things that I was nervous about. And I think we met Don, and I don't think I've seen a more genuine sense of like authenticity in what Christ, like what he thinks Christ is going to do in the city. And I was just like floored. And then as I continued to pray about it, I felt like all of my cons were like my selfish heart and my like guard that was up after some hard conversations over the last couple of years. And since then, like all of the conversations, all of the opportunities, seeing even how like Dave's heart's changed, or like everything has just kind of continued to remind me that these doors are being opened. And so I continue to feel very excited about where God is leading us, and being part of Sideris since the beginning. Like I feel like I went a lot back to the roots of why we started the church in the first place, and it is for the people that are part of the church, and we want to serve the people that are part of Sideris. But like just like we do with Alpha, like there's so many people in Ballard that need us, and so it's about who we are as people and where we're being called to serve. And Ballard keeps just showing up, even though for me it's farther away, and that was one of my cons. But I think God just continues to show up in a lot of ways, and feeling like this is continuing to be a door that is opening wider and wider. So I've had a lot of confirmation of that. I'll stop.
Thanks, Kate. Okay, so Kate mentioned when she saw my heart change. So what she's talking about is I've been the most stubborn, I love Wallingford person probably on the team. Like, I'm super stubborn, if you didn't know that. And God has softened my heart to say, okay, I could let go of Wallingford if this is where you're calling. So that's what Kate's referring to. It's good that you brought that up, because it's hard when you look back and you're like, wow, my heart's really even changed on this, as the most pro Wallingford guy that there ever was. So Andrew, you come on up next.
Yeah, I've got two thoughts. The first takes me back to when I was still dating, and I kept beating my head against the wall with different gals that I was dating, and somebody finally came up to me and said, you know, every relationship you find yourself in has just been hard. It's just been hard. And when you find that right person, things will feel easy. You're going to take a step back one day and go, wow, like this feels light. And Christ says, like, come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And that story just kept coming up over and over again. I remember telling it to Dave at Christmas over dinner. He looked at me thinking, why is he telling me about his dating life? And then we got to the punchline. But this has felt light. The others have felt very hard. They felt very difficult. And God doesn't call us to just do easy things, but I think sometimes God makes it very clear that he is making our burden light. And I felt that in the midst of this process, as Joseph pointed out, the conversation with Don was filled with grace, was filled with hope, was filled with encouragement. And that's not what we were seeing elsewhere. The other thing is that during one of our recent senior leadership team meetings, this idea of being fishers of men came to mind. And this idea that God planted us in Wallingford, and we put our net on one side of the boat, and we caught a lot of great fish, and most of them are sitting here in this room tonight. And I don't fear that this group is going to scatter and leave if we pick up and move, but instead they are going to be on that boat that is Sideris Church, and we're going to go to Ballard, and we're going to put our net on the other side of the boat, and we're going to welcome more and more people into the fold to hear the good news, to enjoy the community that is Sideris, because I think there's something good that's happening here. So why not go share it with somebody else? So those are my thoughts.
Thanks, Andrew. And I always love to hear about your dating life, by the way, because it's just amazing. What a miracle it is that Sarah Ann said yes. I mean, knew this guy. Ask him at his time drinking vodka with the Russians. Okay, so Amanda Campbell, come on up, Amanda.
So my church went through this in Richmond when I lived there, and it was such a great thing for us. It was a similar situation where we didn't have a space, and then we got one gifted to us, and we renovated it, and it became a space where we were able to grow and thrive. And so I've been very excited about this pretty much from day one. I'm really excited about it. One of the biggest reasons I'm excited about it is I have been blessed throughout my life with having people of different generations pour into me, especially like 2 generations above me, right? Not just my parents' generation, but my grandparents' generation. And I'm really excited for that to be part of who we are as a church, because I think we're missing that, and not just like demographically, but we're missing it spiritually. Our concept of end of life issues and what it looks like to be with people that have lived a lot longer than we have. So I think it's going to require growth from us on a lot of levels, and I'm excited for that growth. I think it's going to be a good time of learning and figuring out what it means to not just be mostly, people under 40. So.
Thanks, Amanda. All right, I'm going to ask, and she has been on this ever since the jump. It just takes me a while to catch up to Amanda, where she was at. Well, we're ready to go, Dave. Okay, so Joshua. So I'm going to invite, one of the things we love about having Joshua on the senior leadership team is he's in his 20s. So he sees the world through different lenses, than we do. And you're not from this, you didn't grow up in this country, but mainly you're in your 20s, which is great.
It's great.
So, okay.
Glad to be in my 20s. So when you say that, I think, as I was thinking about coming up here and sharing, it's like I'm the ideal person that spends all their time in Ballard, and I've only lived mostly in Wallingford and Phinney Ridge, and never spent almost any of my time in Ballard. But I have a lot of friends that do, and a lot of people who need the gospel that do, and even just seeing the statistics, I'm a statistics geek, and to see that there's 3 times the population living in Ballard, like that is a great opportunity for us. But I think the biggest thing is like one of my friends works in Ballard, and they were praying and walked past this church and prayed that new life might enter this place. And as I shared with them this potential merger and move, they got really excited. I've been spending a lot of time in Ballard lately, walking around and praying for the place, and it's starting to feel like where our church hub could be. I didn't know that was a slide either, but church is a hub, right? Life happens on Sunday morning. We all experience that. That's why we're here right now, but worship in our life with God happens every day. And so if we're worried about moving or being somewhere else, like, that's fair. We need to lead with lament, right? It's a principle here, and as we consider this more and more, I'm going to lament not having that prayer room or some of these spaces, but that's just opportunity to have a new prayer room and a new kids room and new places to pour into. And so I think Joseph said it well to start. That word came to mind from the day we visited Ballard Baptist. It's just peaceful. It's a sunnier day in January. That probably helps, right? But I mean, just the peace that came upon me. I drove up, I was like, uh-oh, what is this? And then as soon as I entered in, and they were still meeting, they were having like a potluck that day, but there was just immense peace, right? And I think we can't overlook that. And so, I just think it's exciting. It's an opportunity. I started in Hamilton Middle School. I left and came back, and this had to start to feel, I had to get comfortable with coming here, right? It felt foreign to me, and over time, this place has felt like a place that's been really special as well. And I think the beauty of what we did in the Hamilton Middle Schools, we had to tear down and set up every day, and that required the community to come together at 8 a.m. in the morning and stay until 1. And so even though we'll have more of a permanent location, there's a lot of opportunity to serve as a community, to work alongside one another, to think together, to process together, and to grow together. And I think that's what's super exciting about this potential move. So.
Awesome. Thanks, Joshua. I still remember when Joshua walked into Hamilton Middle School the first time. Just the.
Did he look like he was in middle school?
He looked like he'd had a good time on Saturday night. You may have been out in Ballard that Saturday night. It's hard to know. Downtown, yeah, him and Nate, and wow, it's just so cool to think about that and how God, yeah, I love the analogy of throwing nets everywhere. Let's see where the fish come about. So, okay, last but not least, Tylene. What? Ryan, you don't get to share. You already got to share. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I'm definitely on Team Dave of like being the last stone to turn. Part of it is, I mean, I recognize I'm also very new to this community, but also very, very much so this church has been my sanctuary, like coming out of a very traumatic, like leaving of my home. And I'm like, I was really kind of wrestling a lot and processing it with this senior leadership. And I was really annoyed with God of like, really, like, you seem to do this thing in my life where you pick me up and put me in a different space, and like, so stability is like a really big thing for me. But one of the things that really softened my heart lately was, I mean, obviously at the end of the day, 7 million versus a gift. I mean, okay, that's, but of course we endeavor to like really discern. But my heart is also very much close to the people across the bridge there at U District. A lot of people that I do life with on the weekly are there, and one of the ideas, and this is when I know my heart has been changing, is that God has started to give me new ideas of like, one, Andrew did bring up in our previous meeting that we still have 3 cohorts in Wallingford, 3. So it's not like the church is leaving, our presence will very much still be here. But also that we have a principle called No More Airport Ubers. And this is what Dave was saying earlier, of like, well, we can also translate that to no more buses to Ballard, in the sense that this allows for us to really be a church on Sundays and say, hey, I am one person in a 4-seated car. Who can I bring with me so that it's just a 7-minute drive and not a 12 or 15-minute drive, and it's going to be a nice, moment on a Sunday morning to maybe have coffee before service or whatever. This is my hope. And my encouragement. But also, like really engaging this body to step out of our comfort zones, to really love on people, and bring them along and just do this together. I know that God is good and He loves us, and that He will never, do anything that would harm. He puts us in challenging situations, but it is all for us to grow. And so that's always my comfort and my trust, and I'm really, really excited for old people and for worship and for a new place. But it's just my own disposition and nature that change is triggering for me. So it takes really the grace of God and the Holy Spirit working in my heart. But I see it happening, and I'm excited. And please help us. Thank you, bye.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, could you guys let's give a round to the SLT. Most of them didn't know that 4-hour meetings were possible to talk about this kind of stuff, but I taught them how to do that. So they learned, yeah. And I'm glad that's great to have Ty last year, because the amount of processing that the SLT has gotten to do around this idea. I mean, we're like, tens of hours down the line, and lots of this stuff's new for you guys. So there's no question. So we're going to do a time of Q&A. You can Q&J. We're going to hit that. So there's no question or even feeling or sentiment. Lament is a part of this process, and I think, we've been sort of pre-lamenting because, we've seen writing on the wall, and then something will happen, and so there's no place you need to be at. I think we've presented this opportunity in a pretty positive light, but if you're not optimistic about it, that's totally okay too, and we want you to write down concerns that you have and thoughts that you have as we continue to discern whether or not this is where we go. And so we want to hear everyone's voice on that. So know that a lot of the opinions you heard here are after probably at least 15 hours of meeting and talking about it with one another. So it's going to take time too to process this and to think about this, and it doesn't just happen with a great PowerPoint presentation or a Q&A or something like that. But yeah, just know we're all processing too. Like, it's still really hard to think about, not being right here. This feels like home right now, and so it's hard. And I'm so glad that you said that, Ty, because we don't ever want to pretend that it's not a little bit of this and a little bit of that. It's always going to be both. So with that, let's open it up. Does anybody have a question? Yes, Lynn.
There's a logistics one. What does it mean that the developer is open to negotiating?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like, if you're willing to pay us this absurd amount of money, we're open to take it. So like, that's kind of, so we haven't stopped, we haven't told them we're not interested. So, if they came back and said, hey, we were playing hardball with you, we thought you were going to cave, and you didn't, and fine, we'll sell it to you for what it's worth, we may need to have another meeting, a family meeting, right? So, but right now they're basically asking twice what the fair market value of it is. Yeah, so that's a good question. Yeah, so they've made it sort of obvious they're negotiating, but they want us to break up with them. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important to note, he's a developer, but he's not just on his own. He's got investors that are part of this project, and so he's made promises to them. And he's basically saying, give me what I would get if I did all this work, but give it to me now without taking any risk. It's a great opportunity for him if we bid on it. But he has people he's answering to, and so it's not just convincing him, it's convincing a whole slew of people expecting it next year.
But there's no plans for
Well, as far as we know, the plan is for them to bulldoze in July. But we don't know. Since we've only been talking about sale price, at some point we'll ask them, could we have an extra month or two? Or we don't know exactly how far down the road they are. Yeah. But we have a lease, so they can't. I mean, we have definitely to the end of June. Yeah. Ryan.
I have some additional questions. One is, what's going to happen? Assuming that we're going to end up in value.
Yeah.
What's going to happen to, I guess, the funds that we've been saving up locally to purchase this building?
Yes. So we've saved up about $700,000 that we've been holding for like a down payment on a property if it ever came up. So that money then we would use towards some of these renovations to, for instance, create a lobby area. There's just, there's a lot of deferred maintenance on a 114-year-old church. So we get to use that to sort of send us off into, church ownership, hopefully in a really good space rather than not having any money. That's sort of one of the issues with this space is we'd have to use all that money just to get into a loan, and there's some deferred maintenance on this space, some significant deferred maintenance that we tend to just close our eyes and say, yes, God can do miracles. Can fix that hole in the roof, no problem. Okay. Oh yeah, who was it, DJ next?
Ben.
Oh, Ben.
I believe that God will go before us wherever He leads us. And so with that in mind, I'm curious, as you think about valor, what type of pathways or avenues do you foresee being established and building relationships amongst schools and businesses and neighborhoods and neighbors about what pathways do you foresee and how would we go about the relationships?
Yeah. Ryan, do you want to?
I think, sure, I don't know yet.
Yeah.
I don't know. We do know that Ballard Baptist is really close to another church called Trinity Presbyterian Church, who we're close friends with, and they've already kind of expressed excitement that we're moving into the neighborhood. It's like 3 blocks away, and they want to partner with us in terms of different things already that they've given us invites to. Definitely going to be funding that farmers market a lot more myself
Yeah.
as a patron. But as far as like businesses and schools go, we haven't established anything yet. I know Ballard High School is right there on 15th and 65th, not far. But
The Ballard Baptist building is across the street from the Boys and Girls Club. That's one thing we think, well, that feels like a no-brainer partnership. They already rent parking lot space from the church, so there's an existing relationship. So that's something to pray about and consider, and yeah. DJ.
My mind was just like our proximity to the district here is really close. That's obviously a lot of people who found their way to Sideris and started from over there on the other side of I-5 and made their way here, almost like to escape the U district but not go that far.
Yeah.
I feel like to me Ballard is like out of radar range for those people. Did you guys have any conversations about just like demographically what changes if we're in Ballard, or are there a lot more rich people, or are there a lot more like I'm just curious like what the I mean I'll look at myself like how that might change our mission or even just the type of people that are there.
Yeah, I think that's what Ty was speaking to. How do we remain connected, to U District in particular? I think that's the one when we all think about it. We love that this feels close enough to U District dwellers, whether that be grad students, college students, or people that just live in and around that area. So I think Ty's idea is part of the solution. I mean, we've even talked about, when you save that much money,
church van.
how many church vans can you buy? How many, I can just picture Tom Mullins driving around the U District. Honk, 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 honk. Just driving around, picking up students. Yeah.
Have some free candy.
So we have talked about it. Yeah, I think that's what makes my heart heaviest, is that thinking about would that sever that connection. And I think we had to be really intentional. And we've never really had a strong sort of college outreach kind of focus. That's not really how we felt God calling us. But it's been so cool lately how many, particularly grad students, have found life here. We don't want that to end, and we want sort of that to continue. And so finding ways to keep that alive and well. And it's obviously been done, right? There are churches historically have been in Ballard who attract all sorts of people from the U District. I drove to Ballard when I was in college there. And so it's harder, but it's just you have to be more intentional, I think. So that's where my heart, that's one of the places heavy and ties, and all of us on the senior leadership team have kind of been weighing that. John?
Yeah, so kind of bouncing off of Ryan's question earlier about the budget, right? So I guess one of my questions is like first of all, do we have a sense of the budget for all the renovations that we want to do and like a sense of scale there? Because I saw these like things that we specifically want to do.
Yeah.
And then I guess also my kind of second part of that is like, are any of those deal breakers before we want to actually go in?
Yeah, great question.
Yeah, we've got some ballpark figures, like big round numbers for those items that we listed out. And there's a little bit of question as to if we run it like exactly. I don't know how this works. Maybe anyone who is here in architect stuff is like, if you renovate this, then this triggers that, which triggers that, which. So we're not really into the details on that aspect of it yet. But it seems to us that there's a way forward, and it's possible we could get towards the upper end of that limit that we have saved up, and we might, we have considered doing. We might have to do like a building fund campaign or something at some point in the future in order to make that happen. So we haven't ruled that out, but we honestly don't have enough hard details yet to know if it's exactly required.
Yeah, like maybe talking to the architect's firm or whatever would help with that, I'm guessing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So we haven't really noted if it's time to engage the architectural firm yet because Ballard Baptist hasn't exactly voted to give us the building. So we're kind of in this strange, so we're in this kind of strange holding pattern for the time being. I don't know if anything there that if we said we couldn't do this, we'd say, oh, we don't want to go over there. But the foyer seems like a pretty big need because you kind of walk into just right into the back of the sanctuary over there. But that feels like something that's very doable. That you could do just the foyer and not trigger much, like create that cascading effect if things need to get updated. But yeah, we're kind of still in answering all those questions. And we'll know more in a month, I think. Don't you think, Dave?
Yeah. We may pay. We haven't paid any architects yet.
I see.
Right.
Yeah.
But, well,
I mean, if you have met any of these architects, these guys drive nice cars. So
Do you think you might wait on, establishing a firm that we're going to go to after we get the vote from them, or?
Yeah, we're trying to figure that out if we want to pay them to do an initial kind of, give us some clearer numbers before,
Right.
just to get the process started or wait. So we're not sure yet. That's one of the decisions and part of it is kind of the excitement that we all feel. If everyone's pretty excited about this, then maybe we're like, you know what? Let's just take the risk and spend a little bit of money so we can get a better idea of how much this would cost. Yeah.
It's plan for church from July 1 until, I think I planned it like October or that.
Yes. Yes. I mean, have you ever been to Jordan Lake's house?
Sure.
This is what it'll feel like. It'll always be like half done.
So we need moving in.
So we would move in. So we would start worshiping July 1.
That's not, you were trying to be like, oh, the nighttime service isn't like our first.
No, that's just adding that on. So we'll still be doing the morning service. But one of the things we're excited about is like, man, we started as a night church. You probably remember that, right? Were you here when we were night still? Yeah. Like we started as an evening church, and that's one of the ideas that's come out, that maybe Ballard would be a even more attractive place to do a night service to reach a certain type of person, Yeah, so we're not committing to that. We're not saying make this decision that has to be, but it's one of the things that we would be excited about, maybe trying out. Yeah. Oh, sorry, Ellie and then DJ. Yeah. No, it's a good idea. Yeah, I mean, I think definitely we don't want to solve every problem on the cheap. Like I do think we want to save, particularly me, Ryan, and Ty, from we're already short-staffed. So yeah, we'll be passing a basket to take a special offering just here in a minute.
It's all the LA Fund. If I can, I'll interject about the budget. Being on the financial oversight team with Joseph and Tom, the giving at this church continues to grow and has actually outgrown where we have been spending historically, but we've kind of put pause on some of that growth in spending, waiting for this to materialize. Like, are we going to be here? Are we going to be there? Are we going to be somewhere else? We don't want to make a bunch of fixed commitments in the midst of that transition. But I think one of the encouraging things of not having a mortgage is it gives us a lot more flexibility to do ministry rather than pay interest. And that means relieving some of the pressure from the staff team that is overwhelmed and overworked at this point. As great a job as they do, we want to give them more space to be themselves. And it also gives us flexibility to do something like that if we need to. The money is there, thanks to your generosity. The question is now, how do we budget that and spend it wisely?
So yeah, good. So that's something we're talking about. Yeah, of the design firm might kind of operate as that kind of one-stop shop that does the project management and stuff. So yeah.
Like in the last few months of being in this building and the first few months of the next building, it will be the most critical time to have like all three of you at like the, you know, want amazing worship, keep people in the room, people in amazing worship, keep people in the room. So you guys are all spent trying to do logistics
Yeah.
and packing chairs and trying to decorate and just all the logistics that go into trying to do a massive building, a massive building. I think a short-term hire would be huge.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think you're right, Ellie. I think there's 175 adults that call Sideris home as well, and really it's something that Dave and I kind of look at each other now and then, and we just say we really need to grow in the skill of delegation, like inviting people. You know, like so that's a felt need.
Dave is very good at delegating to you.
You know, like, and so that I mean, that's well, it's a point that's well heard, Ellie. So thanks, thank you so much.
Yeah, DJ was next to you.
I walked in late, so just before I got here, but what's the capacity of this new building and
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Because I mean, in this room, we're pretty full on the morning already, if we could go down outside.
Yeah, so the room is pretty much the exact same size as far as like square footage. Okay, so
Including the foyer?
There's no.
not including the foyer, right? So
Okay.
if you just took away the foyer here, it's
It's
pretty
still the
much the
same.
exact
Okay.
same from the stage out. So I think we'll be able to fit the same number of chairs on the main floor as we can here. The balcony is slightly smaller, but actually is a better view than this balcony. But yeah, I mean, the layout's not exactly the same. Like the balcony kind of hangs over the first, you know, like, so it's there. It'd be basically if the chairs were in the foyer. That's kind of a way to think about it. In the stages up. So it's about, but the square footage of where the main floor. So yeah, we're going to be right at the edge of needing to consider potentially a second service, depending on how things go. But we could right now, no problem, fit everybody on a Sunday. But yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. Kristen.
Sorry, I wasn't sure if you were moving. I think, I have a question and then it's just like a general like topic. I know you said that your current congregation has seemed really open to change. I have a really hard time believing that. I feel like in general, I don't want to generalize the older population, but I feel like few people are excited for change. So I think my question is, I guess, what gave you that persona? And then I guess secondly, to me, like the biggest obstacle is not the logistics of the space or obviously the money or us driving there. It's how you merge two congregations in a way that continues to create a specific culture. And I think that's something that is way more difficult than putting pen and paper.
Yep. Yeah, and I think what gives us optimism, it'll probably be more clear if you were in the rooms with us. There's not sort of like two options for them. It's either this or they'll probably shut down at the end of the year. So I think that's part of why there's an openness. Because I think you're right. I think if it was like they could maintain what they're doing, I do think there would be a lot more. So I think it will be hard for them, but I think because they see, you know, just the reality. So Don has already announced his retirement at the end of the year, one way or another. He did that before he mentioned us to the congregation. So they know they've got. So I think that's part of why they're really excited, because they're like, oh, we get to keep worshiping in this building. You know, some of them have been there since they were 5 years old, and they're 95 years old. So that's the kind of people that are, not all of them, but there's a handful that are like in their 90s, and like grew up in the church, and then there's like another group that's in their probably 60s that I think will experience a lot of life. And so I think you're right. It's going to be harder than we think it's going to be. It's going to be one of those things that. Yep. Yep. Yeah.
It's not the same like copy and paste as we're talking about. Like we're just gonna do what we do here, there. Like that doesn't. I don't say that doesn't work, but I don't think that's the reality of working in two conversations.
Yeah, and that's why it's. And Don is actually the one, like he said, like we were at the Q&A and he almost made us feel uncomfortable, where he'll like say to his congregation, this is a merger, but Sideris will do whatever they want when they get here. So he's making it very clear this isn't like we all get to vote on what to do with the chairs or what to do, where to put, like, he's like, and we're like really uncomfortable because we're like, hey, we're just meeting these people, don't. But Don is like, he's like, he knows his people, you know, he's been ministering to them for 42 years. And so I think having Don there he'll still be, Ballard Baptist will continue to exist as an entity, and Don will pastor his people. And the hope is that over the 6 months before he retires, they learn to trust us and get a sense. So it won't be like day one, they have to like become members of Sideris Church. But I don't think it's gonna be, there's gonna be some pushback. And I think the advantages of this is that Don is sort of been really open and honest with all of them of this isn't sort of a voting, like you get a little bit of this and you get a little bit of that. It's just like, hey guys, we're dead either way. Do we want to keep this building going? Yeah, no, I mean that's what Don says to them. Like, guys, I'm gone at the end of the year. You have no, and it's like when I preach there's like 12 people that are there on a typical Sunday. So there's not a lot of people. So I think the thing that we need to be aware of is we have to go out of our way to make them feel part of our family. That's on you guys to see them and to want to talk to them and to want to go out to coffee with them. And that's, I think, and I believe in our congregation. I don't believe in every congregation could do it. I believe our congregation, we have the ethos that we can do it, but we have to prioritize it. So we can't wait for them to ask us to get to know us. We have to go in there and really want to get to know Wilma and Jerry and Lloyd, and you know I almost know all of their names, and Carrie, and what's the gal who's visually impaired? Marissa.
Yeah.
Marissa, and yeah, so it's like I've almost got to know them already,
Jerry.
you know.
Jerry.
Yeah. Like there's two Jerrys, a Lloyd, a Don, and Christy. Anyhow, so.
One of the funny things Don said, I think he shared it, was like, if you donated a candle to this church 40 years ago and you don't want Sideris to use it, you better take it back.
Yeah. Yeah, he said that to them in front of us, and I was like, we will hold your candles. We will keep your candles. No, they do struggle to pronounce the name, which we all did when we started. Yeah, and it's good to make fun of it because I think they all make fun of it. So. Yeah.
I think one of the last things is for me having gone to visit back in January, because we walked out the door, complete strangers, obviously not fitting their demographic, and Carrie's arm from the back of the sanctuary just went like this, and just kept saying, "Come in, come in, come in." And I think that kind of typifies the ethos of that church, which should bode well.
Yeah, and that's maybe a key thing. Like there are congregations that I think are so set in their ways, and of course all people are set. We're set in our ways, but the reason they're where they're at is not because they don't want to keep reaching the neighborhood. And that can be sometimes why churches end up there. I mean, they are very mission focused and oriented, and so I think that will be helpful. But it won't be easy. It's too, like you said, you're exactly right. That will probably end up being the most difficult part, and something that we can't just naively step into and say, this is just there's not gonna be any feelings hurt or things hurt. Yeah, Peter.
Sarah Castellani had her hand
Oh,
up for a long time.
yeah, Sarah. Yeah. Right, yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. So the legalities of it, so there's sort of, it's sort of challenging. The legalities are they will gift Sideris Church the building. We won't merge to 501c3s. That is one way to do it, but what their lawyer is suggesting, and there's a lot of reasons for it, it's just cleaner to gift Sideris the building, and then they can maintain as a separate organization as long as they want. They'll distribute some of their funds to the missionaries they support, things like that, while we continue, to merge spiritually and merge interpersonally. And so, yeah, there's no requirement that we become a part of the denomination they're a part of or anything like that. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, I guess do we anticipate any very different beliefs on things?
Oh yeah, good. Yeah. No, there's a lot of alignment with, pretty much full alignment. We talked, that was a lot of the questions they had when we were there, like how do you guys do communion? Why do you do it that way? That kind of stuff. That probably is more important to like a older generation where a lot of controversies and splits happened over things like that. And so, yeah, we may change some of the ways we do communion or include some of the ways they do it with how we do it, just to also make them feel at home. But theologically, there's no difference. There's some practicalities of, whether, you come up to the front or that kind of stuff.
And most people don't know this. The Baptists got really clever in the 80s, and they started dropping their name Baptist off their church buildings and started calling themselves non-denominational instead. So, like, if you grew up in a non-denominational church, it was probably actually Baptist, oriented.
Yeah.
Peter's nodding. He knows. He's the son of a Baptist minister right there, And so we're actually, they're part of something called the Converge Church Planting Network, if there's any church planting network that we kind of dip our toe in the most. We're not formally associated with anyone, but we have tons of relationships with a lot of different churches. But with Converge Church Planting Network in particular, who are the Swedish Baptists, I suppose. Maybe there's some more clarity you want to provide there. But.
Yeah, one of the really cool things, if you didn't hear this part of the story, the very first time I met Don, within 5 minutes we found out that my pastor that I grew up with did Don's ordination 42 years ago. So that was like a cool thing, like, oh, that's weird and cool, and what's going on here? So that was one of those, yeah. So in that sense, there's a lot. There'll always be little things that, why don't you talk more about this, or why don't you highlight this issue more, or this. It's going to be more of those kinds of things of why don't we talk more about maybe a political issue or something like that. But I think on a theological statement level, where there's tons of alignment. And we both have the same kind of idea of polity of church. Each local church is independent and, has its own leadership. So in that sense, it's not a merger of two different polities into one. So, and they haven't asked to have any of their leaders join our leadership team. I think they just want someone to take over and lead the thing moving forward into the next decade. That's their hope, and so that's why they're wanting to get to trust us, that we're trustworthy. Elise. Oh yeah, Peter and Elise. Elise first. Yeah.
Do you envision continuing our cadre cohort rhythm? Will we adopt any rhythms they have?
No, I think we'll just keep doing cohorts, cadres. Yep, and I think that's really important. Yeah, and I think we talked about that when we met with them. We'd love to have you guys come in. We know this probably will be a stretch for you, because I think honestly, it's hard to explain, without seeming being insensitive, but going to church on a Sunday for a lot of them is that's their big outing of the week. They're in that life phase. So that's why we have to get creative with how we create community with them. And I think some of them, the younger, will jump into cohorts. They were very excited about that. They're like, yeah, they'll do they're excited about the women's Bible study that we just got done with in Amos. They're like, oh, yes, finally, they do that as well, but it's a very, 2 or 3 of them. So I think there's lots of things they can jump into, but I think we just keep doing what we're doing. I think that's the key, is that we don't want to be overly sensitive to stepping on their toes so that we stop doing what we're doing. And I think Dawn is preaching that message of like, hey, we just want to gift this and add fuel to this thing that's already happening, and not want us to change anything that we're doing. So so I think we'll keep doing that. And then there'll be little things that they'll invite us to, like they've got a quilting club and I'm like, I know at least 5, and you would love this, at least like 5 or 6 people I know who would be so excited to come. So they get really excited about that. You'd come to that, wouldn't you? Well, then you could learn, yeah. I mean, I might show up, yeah. But like fun stuff, and I think they don't believe us when we say we're excited about that. You know what I mean? Like I think a lot of people would be really excited, because that's always the problem. Older generation doesn't think the younger generation wants anything to do with them. The younger generation thinks the older generation just thinks they're a bunch of screw-ups. And it's like, no, like we're already preaching the message of, we want you guys to know that you're needed and you're wanted and people want to hear from you. So. Yeah, so Peter or Tom. Peter, you had your hand up first.
Yeah. Given that they are denominationally affiliated, why have they sought out quality pastor?
Yeah, and they talked about that, and they just don't have the resources to do it. Yeah. And honestly, like this is part of the kind of miracle. We're so tight-knit with their district guy. We literally went a meeting with him last week talking about this, celebrating. He was telling us all the plants that Ballard So it's like there is this sense of we're not a part of that officially, but everybody knows us, and it's almost like the perfect situation, And they know, and that the Converge people know, they have not been able to get a church plant to stick in Seattle. So they take credit for us, and we're fine with that, because we're the one doing it. So it's like a really fun little, we're just all hunky-dory over there. So I think it is like a win-win-win situation. Yeah, so Tom was next, I think.
I just wanted to say, being on the opposite end, generationally, for most of you.
Not me, Tom, not me. We're right there.
You're a special case. When we first started coming here, I felt that same kind of reticence about how are we going to be received and what's going to go on. And I just wanted to try to say this without crying, but thank you guys, because everybody rose to the occasion. You made Saturday night feel at home. And you welcomed us, in spite of ourselves sometimes, but it's been really, really good. And so I know that this congregation is capable of doing that. And you will rise to that occasion to make these people feel welcome and feel a part of this, because you've done that for us already. So thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, Tom. Somebody else, I saw. Kyler?
Yeah, so I have a question. I do, so I don't know to be, again, we're going to be basically still the church, but they're in the building. But in that process, right, I feel like in my head it's going to feel like merging, because it is a new building with new people in a different place. And as that happens, I guess, over these next few months, I guess how are you all leadership thinking to convince the people that come here, like the culture we have, I guess, going, because I feel like it's going to, especially that first, it's probably going to be a few months, it's going to feel, we don't want to, I wouldn't want to step on anyone else's ground and just plant where I am, I guess, and
Yeah.
do the same things. I guess with the community here is really one of the reasons that I moved in and helped me feel comfortable in discussing around with
Yeah. Yeah, that's what we need to start thinking about, talking about. This is sort of a first step towards just getting all the information that we need. I've got like 3 slides at the end that I'll talk about, like things that we can start, that I think we can start doing now to start thinking about that, you know? So, yeah, I think you're right. It won't just happen like overnight. We have to start planning for it and thinking about it. So,
let's take one more question. We can segue to those.
Yeah,
Yeah. One more question.
if you haven't, is there anybody that hasn't asked a question yet that wants to ask? Yes, Sally.
Well, it just occurred to me because I just wondered if it would be helpful to maybe have some Sundays where we meet over there and meet
Yeah.
either Pastor or you, or just have us mingle over there before we actually start.
Yep, yeah. Yeah, and we were already talking about, you know, when and if we should do that, and
Because I know some things that come up in individuals' minds.
yep, yeah, yeah. So, yes, and yes, and we're not sure when and how to do that yet, but that wasn't much. We want one bonus question. Anybody? Okay. All right, John.
So off of DJ's question a bit earlier, he's talking about the size of the space. Right, we talked about renovations like, you know, building a foyer. Did you mean building a foyer in the existing square footage or adding it outside?
The existing.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an older building, so there's just lots of walls and lots of rooms.
Okay.
And the architect had a really good idea about 2 or 3 rooms that you could really combine into a foyer that's next to the sanctuary space.
Okay, so it'll be next to, it won't take away from the existing sanctuary.
No.
Right,
no.
right,
Okay,
yeah,
okay,
yeah,
that's
and
fine.
make it feel connected. They're tossed around glass walls, a lot like you have back here.
I see.
The windows to connect the two. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, we'll see what actually it looks like, but seems like a pretty compelling vision that could work really well.
Okay.
At this point, yeah.
Okay, good. Well, thank you guys. Let's get these last few slides. So, and do please fill out put other questions and things and concerns, excitements, because we want to read through all of those and let it guide sort of our conversations moving forward.
Yeah.
So this gets Kyler's not there. To Kyler's question a little bit, which is, what can everybody do? Okay, and by everyone here do.
Yeah.
Champions of hope. Okay, so I really want to wait for Kyler to come back, but but he's gone. Okay, so explain this, to Kyler. But like part of being here, being a family member at Sideris, being committed to, sacrificing for one another, loving one another, we are, we're not worried about the transition for you guys. You guys are willing to come on a Tuesday night to a meeting. You're willing to say, this is my family, and I'm going to sacrifice and give financially and do all the things. And so this is not primarily the group that transitions will be hard for. We'll be able to do this. But there will be another layer of people. We have at least probably 100 to 75 people that are more disconnected or one level less connected, that this will feel scary to, or even the enemy will use something like even thinking about this to sort of say, oh, it's not worth investing, it's not worth getting involved in a cohort, it's not worth because, all this change is about to happen. So we really want you guys to be the champions of hope, champions of like, this is exciting, this is a new thing that God's doing, and hopefully, if we all continue to feel like this is the right thing to do forward, that there'll be this excitement that we can pass along. But we should just expect that it won't be as exciting for everyone, and more people will have to sacrifice in different ways than others. But I think everyone here today, we really want you guys to be the ones that can pass anything you've heard in the tonight. You can pass on to people that aren't here, people that have questions. I think we're at the point where it's okay to start talking about it, because one way or another will be probably, unless something drastically different changes, moving out of this space into a new space, but that means nothing in the kingdom of God, right? Like, God is always moving his people around. So go to the next slide here, Ryan.
Could I further clarify Champions of Hope? I think this could look a couple ways realistically. The first would be just leading with lament with anybody that is really struggling. A lot of people at our church have only known us here, and it holds a special place in their heart. And so even if you're kind of excited to go, you might even channel a time when you felt like you were moved on from something that you were really had a close, like a soft spot in your heart for. So for me, it's Hamilton, actually. We got kicked out of Hamilton, and we worked really hard, and that was going great. We got kicked out of Hamilton. So like, I channel that when someone's like, I don't really want to leave this space at all. I know exactly what you mean. Like, so just leading with lament is a way that you can be a champion of hope, starting there. And then the scriptures use these words called encouraging and exhorting, letting people know that they can do it, and letting people that might throw up some bad reasons, kind of maybe wrestling through those with them a little bit of, are you thinking about this right? Have you thought about it like this instead, you know? So is there any other ways that you could champion hope, other leading with lament, encouraging people that they can't do it, being willing to talk to them about their objections that they might still have to?
Oh yeah, let them ask questions, and you know, it's not exactly clear, and it's okay to say that, like, we don't know exactly how this is going to work out. We've never done this.
We don't have it figured out.
But telling the history of God's faithfulness is important too. Yeah. Like it's funny, we say it now, like, it was hard for you to leave Hamilton, and when you tell that story, everyone else probably thinks, oh, in order to come here at 10 o'clock in the morning and preach. No, when we left Hamilton, we didn't know, well, the COVID just happened and they just shut it down. And we didn't know, and we didn't get offered here, we got offered the parking lot. And we met in the parking lot for a bit. Like, that's actually the transition, you know, so like, just, when I look back on, I think you tell the story, like, when you look back, like, I have no idea how we're sitting here right now. Like, I don't know how any of this worked out. If you knew, like, my plan for music 2 weeks before we launched the church, you would laugh. You would laugh if you knew the plan. You would laugh if you knew what the plan was before Tylene got here. You'd laugh if you knew what the plan, I mean, it's just God just continually, and I think I want to use this opportunity to help people that struggle to trust God learn how to trust God. And I've learned to trust God in new ways like you wouldn't believe. And so that's why storytelling is important. It's important to tell the story of how we met Dawn. Like, it's such a crazy story. Mm-hmm. Like, every fiber of my being did not want to go to that pastor's prayer meeting that morning. And I was about to turn around, and something compelled me, just go. And I dreaded, I was like, this is going to be a waste of my time. I got so much to do. That's what I was saying internally. And then God did what he did. And so it's important to tell stories through this whole process of how God's shown up in the hard and the bad. You know, it's been really hard, but also he just keeps providing us with hope. So, good. Okay, so then practically, here's 4 things. Continue to pray for clarity, both for yourself and for the senior leadership team and for the congregation at Ballard Baptist. And then really this spring, prioritize your cohort. Really build those bonds deep, because the church is not, like the thing I love most about Sideris, we're not just a Sunday service. I am not a theater manager. And you come to the theater on Sundays, and I hope you have a good, like, we're not theater managers. We have this dynamic, vibrant community, and if we prioritize our cohorts, the hope is that nobody gets sort of left behind in a transition like this. That does happen, but I don't want to be pessimistic about that. I want to be like, no, if we invest in each other in a community, hopefully it doesn't feel as big of a change, because people are like still got their cohort and they've got cadres and they've got, so just really, especially this spring, prioritize your cohort and press into people and connect with people. And you know, there's gonna be some people that don't even know this is coming. Make sure they get into a cohort, make sure they get connected so that they don't feel like the rug's being pulled out of them as we get closer and closer to a potential move. And then the third thing is to celebrate God's provision, like I already said. Like, So we lead with lament, and we also celebrate his provision, because this story is about celebrating how he's provided for us for 9 years. Like I said, we're not a denominational church. We don't got Presbyterian money. Nobody's bought us anything. It's been God. People have it's amazing that we exist. There's no reason we should exist besides God, and that's part of why we planted the stupid way we did. It's like a really bad idea, but if you read our original prospectus, it's part of the plan to do things the dumb way, so that no one thinks it's because we had an amazing plan. And it's like, for the first time in my life, I thought, we're finally at a place where we could have a plan and get a mortgage and be adults. And God said, you're not going to get the credit for this. That's what it feels like. He's like, no, Dave. And so he said, we had really good plans, guys, didn't we? We had great plans. The SLT knows. I've got spreadsheets, I've got amazing plans, and none of them worked. And then God's like, I got a dawn for you. Okay. So celebrate that, though. That is just, don't take yourself too serious. Celebrate how God's always provided, and then cultivate a sense of adventure. This is an adventure, right? Like, some of you weren't a part of any of the other adventures we've been on, of leaving the living room for the coffee shop, or leaving the coffee shop for the nighttime sanctuary, leaving the sanctuary for Hamilton, or leaving Hamilton for a parking lot, or leaving a parking lot for sharing a space with the Vietnamese church. It's a venture. This might be the first chance some of you get to be on the adventure of starting a new church, and it's really exciting. I really am excited for this, and that's another way you can help people. You guys got to be the champions of this is a fun adventure. Let's throw the nets on the other side and see what happens. Let's see organizations and people that we can bless, because our proximity will be different. There's an adventure here that's, I hope you guys feel it as we move forward. So, I think it's the last slide, right? We got one more? No, that's it. So.
Oh, my graphic.
Oh, they can see your graphic design there, right? Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, it is just the tip of we'd love to talk more about this if you want to talk more about it over the phone or send emails, but also pass in your sheets, and that'll help us as at some point we'll do a church, if this continues to progress, we'll do a church-wide. So let's stand up, and I'm going to have Joseph come and pray for us to close our time.
Okay. Lord God, we love you and we trust you. Help us to learn to love you more and trust you more as we go through this transition. You won't let us learn to put our hope in anything else. You won't let us put our hope in our own wisdom, our own planning. You just mess it up just enough to show us that we trust in your wisdom, which is infinite. We don't have to be scared that we don't know what we're doing, because you do know what you're doing. We don't have to put our trust or our hope in a building, because you don't dwell in a building made with human hands. The earth is just your footstool. You made the whole earth, and you have bigger plans than just a building. Thank you for calling us into that. Thank you for calling us into this adventure here in Seattle to reach the people here that you love. I pray that we wouldn't be distracted from you in this, but that we would press into you. That as we see the amazing ways that you have provided for us in ways that you can't really explain, they seem miraculous, that we would learn to trust you, that you're paying attention, that you know what we need, and that you'll give it to us when we need it. Thank you for all my friends here. Thank you for this community. It's quite a blessing. Please give us unity, give us wisdom, give us energy as we go through this tough transition. And we'll give you all the glory. Amen.
Okay, so if you didn't get or read the email that we sent out, I mean, one of the things we just don't, when Joseph prayed for unity, that just reminded me. We invited family members to this because, you know, it means something to be a family member, but that doesn't mean that we don't want other people as a part of this. There's nothing secret we shared here. But just say, you know, and we know there's people that are about to go through the family member process and things like that. So just make sure that nothing about this meeting being a family meeting makes anybody feel a sense of, I'm not a part of this or something like that, okay? So I think unity is so important through all of this discerning process. So thanks guys for being here. We love you. And can't wait to read all the thoughts and questions. So Andrew, you got it? If anybody else, drop this off with Andrew. Okay, we'll see you guys. Well, Good Friday. Good Friday, 7 o'clock here. Easter, 10 o'clock. It's a busy week. Luckily, I need no sleep. But now in my thank you, Andrew.
I just want to say,
yeah, I know. No, they were trying to do so many different